This podcast comes from the corner of a country lane in the middle of England.
Tonight we're talking about husbands and wives in a Tudor household.
Here is Malcolm Noble's Talk Genealogy Podcast, the podcast for the genealogists with too much time on their hands.
Hello family historians and welcome to the Talk Genealogy Podcast. And this is one of the weekly supplements that I'm posting prior to the publication of my new book, A Practical Introduction to Medieval Genealogy, which comes out in February, not long to go now. And when that book comes out, of course, we'll revert to the normal monthly format. In the meantime, these weekly schedules are meant to be short, no more than 10-15 minutes. Think of them as your weekly supplement to the main podcast.
The Talk Genealogy Podcast looks at different techniques and interesting sources for family historians. Or perhaps a discussion about early genealogists, the pioneers of our science. Sometimes we look at how a famous character in history shows us something particular about genealogy. But hey, most of the time we talk about whatever comes into our head, building an audio library for genealogists with too much time on their hands.
Please remember, I'm not an expert or a professional. I'm an enthusiast like you, who has spent more than 40 years digging up his family tree, so often in the wrong place. And these episodes, well, they're really no more than me sharing with you what I have learned along the way. And I do want to emphasize, I am talking about ancestor hunting in England.
Recommended by Who Do You Think You Are magazine and featured on BBC Radio. Here is Malcolm Noble's Talk Genealogy Podcast, the podcast for the genealogists with too much time on their hands. Here is your presenter, Malcolm Noble.
Okay, let's get started. If we want to reconstruct a Tudor household in rural England, the first thing that we need to do is to forget everything that we think we know and go straight to the sources. But we can be generous in what we count as a source. Written documents matter, of course they do, but I want to begin with something that often gets overlooked: Tudor woodcuts. Now, before we draw conclusions from a woodcut, we want to check its authenticity. Is it a genuine 16th century drawing? If so, that deserves close study. If it's a later Tudor style illustration, set it aside. Those Victorian and Edwardian reconstructions tell us more about their own fantasies than the 16th century that our ancestors lived through. Now in front of me I have a genuine Tudor woodcut showing a family in what the Wills would call the parlour. The husband sits in a substantial chair reading scripture aloud to his wife and 6 small children. Through the window we glimpse someone gathering livestock, probably sheep, but the detail is too blurred to be certain. The children cluster around their mother, one on her knee, she is clearly pregnant by the way, others on the floor or leaning against her stool. Now at first glance we might say, look, the husband has the privilege, he gets the comfortable chair. But that's a modern reading. In the Tudor world, the chair is a symbol of authority, not indulgence, and authority came with responsibility. The husband's duty was to oversee the spiritual welfare of the household. That's what this woodcut is teaching. Meanwhile, someone else, not the husband, not the wife, is doing the farm work outside. Even this tiny detail tells us something. The household economy involved more than just the married couple. And look at the child's toy, a ball on a string. These behavioural details are far more revealing than their costume. They show us how they lived, how they occupied children, organised their space, how they moved through the day. I now want to turn to Fitzherbert's book on husbandry. This edition was published in 1598, so nicely in our period, and it contains 8 pages of advice for the husband's wife. On waking, he said, the The wife should give thanks to God. Then, when she is up and ready, she should sweep the house, prepare the dresser, put the house in order, milk the cows, feed the calves, get the children up and dressed before preparing her husband's breakfast. That might bring a smile to our faces, but there is no suggestion that the husband has been lying abed all this time. She should produce dinner and supper for her husband and children and take the meals with them. An emphasis there on family role. She should send the corn to the mill, measuring it before it goes and on return against the bill. Or else the miller deals not truly with you, or else the corn is not as dry as it should be. An old folk saying jokes that the honest miller has hair on the palm of his hand. Her other duties include feeding the pigs and poultry, egg collecting, monitoring how well the hens, ducks and geese are laying, and cheese making. England was famous for its geese. Good geese were trained to come along when they heard the rattle of reeds, a tiny detail that opens up a whole world of rural soundscapes and routines. From the beginning of March, she also has responsibility for what we might call the kitchen garden. She also makes sheets, shirts, smocks and other clothes. And of course, she needs to help her husband in the field. But the wife is no dog's body. The author clearly expects her not only to deliver but also to manage these affairs. He conceives that the wife has much to do. If she must leave something out, she should decide what task would be the greatest loss. Furthermore, she is the partner in an economic unit. She's told, and to go or ride to the market, and to sell butter, cheese, milk, eggs, chicken, capons, hens, pigs and geese, and all manner of corn. She is also to buy all manner of necessary things belonging to the household, and to make a true reckoning and account to her husband what she has paid. And if the husband goes to the market to buy and sell, then, as they often do, he should then show his wife in a like manner. Now, it's not too much of a step to suggest that the wife may have kept the accounts in some cases. There is some suggestion that Shakespeare's mother performed this task in the Stratford leather business.
TalkGenealogy.com is the website that supports the podcast for genealogists with too much time on their hands. You find a guide to previous episodes, a list of books mentioned in the series, and, now and then, a bit of a blog. Recommended by Who Do You Think You Are magazine and featured on BBC Radio. Here is Malcolm Noble's Talk Genealogy Podcast.
Now, secondary sources like the husbandry manuals tell us what people ought to do, but it's the primary sources, the wills, court records, manorial rolls, that tell us what people actually did or didn't do, which is more interesting. My approach is always to look for behaviour rather than possessions. What did your ancestors spend time on? What did they do better than others? What did they neglect? Now, inventories can be dull because they're so similar, but that sameness is precisely what makes the oddities stand out. A single unusual item can reveal a skill, a sideline, a hobby, or a household priority. So don't just skim over them, take your time with them, and always look at the background details. For example, a Victorian newspaper report of a theft, I know, not Tudor, but the principle holds, It recorded a witness's testimony about the planning of the crime in an inn. It also recorded what everybody else in the pub was doing. Background information for the prosecution, but gold dust for the social and family historians. Tudor court records do exactly the same thing. They capture the incidental, the unguarded, the everyday.
Malcolm Noble has written a practical introduction to medieval genealogy, over 400 pages, covering the sources, their history, and important chapters on evaluation and analysis of evidence, scaling research pathways, and much, much more. Order your pre-publication copy now from Malcolm Noble at rocketmail.com.
Here's some earlier episodes of the podcast. Episode 15. Let's talk of graves, of worms, of epitaphs. Episode 13 was about the hearth tax. Episode 12, and it was Shakespeare, for example. Episode 9 discussed the medieval pipe rolls. Go to episode 7 for the companions of William the Conqueror. Episode 2, the Herald's Visitations, and our very first episode looked at working with Tudor wills. Building an audio library for the genealogists with too much time on their hands.
Now let me finish with a striking example of how essential this husband and wife partnership was on a small holding. When the plague devastated my family in 1604, a widow remarried within 3 weeks of her husband's death. There's no evidence of a special license, so if we allow time for the banns to be read, the decision to remarry was made almost immediately. Why? Because someone had to replace the husband. And it worked the other way round. Widowers remarried quickly too. Now this wasn't sentimentality or impropriety, it was survival. And furthermore, it was expected by the rest of the community. It was the responsible thing to do. So never mind the supposed privileges of the husband. All the evidence shows that a Tudor marriage was a working partnership, economically, socially, and spiritually.
Hey Malk, what's coming up?
Well, now that we've explored the structure of family life, we can turn to the daily routines, the meal times, bedtimes, the two-sleep night, and the rhythms that shape the Tudor day, and that's the subject of the next episode. My name's Malcolm Noble, and if you've enjoyed tonight's podcast, you know you are the genealogist with too much time on their hands.
Don't forget to download the episode if you want it for keeps. We're not monetized, so we can't maintain episodes in the internet forever. Why not think about downloading tonight's talk to your library?
Our next episode will be posted next Thursday at 5 minutes to midnight, and I hope you'll be there to share it with me.
Thanks to Freeze Effects for the music and Momna Yunus and Emily Brooks for the voiceovers. This podcast comes from the corner of a country lane in the middle of England.
I want to thank you for listening to tonight's episode and wish you all the best with your family tree hunting. Good night, you, and thanks for listening.